The pandemic has been challenging and painful for most people. Loss of friends, loved ones, losing jobs, closing businesses. These are the life-altering events that have hit many of us in 2020 and into 2021. And the toll that's taken on our mental health is undeniable. In December last year, the number of people reporting symptoms of anxiety or depression in a U.S. Census survey rose nearly 300%. So how to bring happiness back? Well, Laurie Santos is professor of psychology at Yale. Her podcast, The Happiness Lab, has a new season out this month. Laurie, welcome back. So let me ask you first about the pain. It's fair to say, and you deal with this, that some of this pain, which is mental, is actually very tangible and in some ways even physically apparent, right?
Yeah, I mean, we tend not to think about like mental health issues as a physical health issue, but it's worth remembering that like our brain is part of our body. If we're experiencing anxiety, if we're experiencing depression, these things are going to manifest in physical symptoms, and things like, how we're sleeping, how we're digesting our food, right? Just all the anxiety we've been experiencing has been activating our fight or flight system, which has lots of physical manifestations. And so the key is that we really need to treat mental health issues like we treat physical health issues. If you broke your leg, you'd go to a doctor and try to deal with it. If you stubbed your toe, you'd put some ice on it. We need to treat mental health issues the same way and really take action and give ourselves some mental health first aid.
So what do we need to do in this? What are your sense of the best strategies to build back better mentally?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the first step is to recognize that it's critical, right? That you need some strategies. And then some of the ones we talk a lot about on the podcast are things like, taking time to feel a little bit more present, right? Taking time to allow emotions that might not feel nice, even allowing emotions like sadness, anxiety, and so on. The research really shows that trying to avoid those emotions is really bad for you. There's evidence that that can lead to things like cardiac stress and even memory problems. So one strategy is just be present, even if it's not perfect, just kind of allow those emotions to be there. Another great strategy we talk about a lot is to experience gratitude, which can be hard in the time of a global pandemic, especially right now as, are we backsliding? What's going on, right? We can tend to focus on all of the negatives, but the research really shows that this just like tiny step of redirecting your attention to the positives can have huge benefits, both in terms of your well-being, but also in terms of making it easier to do things like eat more healthily, save for retirement. There's evidence that gratitude can help with our self-regulation, doing hard things right now to protect our future self. So these kinds of strategies can have lots of benefits.
What does gratitude mean? Like taking the time to really think about the things that are going well or that you should be grateful for?
Yeah, I mean, even in the midst of an awful time like this, there are things that are just wonderful in the world, like the taste of a morning coffee, the fact that your loved ones are alive, your friends smile, summer weather, right? These are just the simple kind of things that if we train our brain to notice it, can be incredibly powerful.
You also talk in the podcast to Rob Lowe, the Hollywood actor, and it turns into a fascinating conversation about nostalgia. And it made me think it actually has a lot of political implications, the power of nostalgia. So first explain what you talked to Rob about.
Yeah, well, nostalgia is this funny emotion because it's kind of bittersweet, thinking back to the past in this sort of wistful way. Historically, people thought of nostalgia as a neurological disorder. It was identified in the 1600s, and people thought that it was the kind of thing that soldiers experienced, maybe Swiss soldiers. They thought it was due to the clanging of Swiss cowbells, which was super weird. But it took folks a really long time to realize that nostalgia isn't a neurological disorder. It can have these positive consequences. It can make us feel more socially connected when we think back to the good days of the past. It can even make us feel like we have a little bit more meaning in our lives. But nostalgia can also be kind of negative, right? In part because our nostalgia for the past isn't an accurate representation of the past. There's lots of evidence that our minds edit our memories. We focus on the good things and not the bad. In some ways, we even incorporate imagined realities. The novelist Gabriel Garcia Marquez talked about how we can become easy victims to the charitable deceptions of nostalgia. And I think this plays out on the political stage when we can think back, and think, oh, the past was so great, let's go back there again. But we're thinking back to a past that in some cases never happened.
So that, when you think about, obviously, Make America Great Again, that is nostalgia. But that's often been, there's often been this idea that there was once a Garden of Eden, and that we've fallen from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, this is the way we think back to, our society's old days, but it's also the way we think back to our personal old days. Like our memories just don't incorporate the bad stuff. It's what researchers call rosy retrospection. When we look back at the past, we wear these rosy glasses and everything looks great. That means our individual decisions are bad. I might choose to take a vacation that, really wasn't fun in reality. But it means societally, we often want to go back to policies, situations that in reality weren't good. And it's the fault of our memory that we're choosing to want to go back to those things.
And how does Rob Lowe fit into all of this?
Well, Rob is kind of a funny case. He was such a famous actor in the 80s. It was so cool for me to interview him because he was one of my idols. And his advice actually came, from a lot of the work that he's done with his own addictions and his addiction treatments, which is the mantra of kind of being in the present moment, trying to make the present good so that it too will be filled with the kinds of events that lead to good memories down the line. And I think that's a really great message. We can get the pleasures of nostalgia, but we often want to use our wistful thoughts about the past to figure out what are we missing in the present. If you're thinking back to high school and like, oh, my high school days with all my friends, maybe that means you need a little bit more social connection right now. If you're wistfully thinking back to a past job when you had fun, maybe that means you need to build in a little bit more of the kinds of things you enjoy in your life. So we can use nostalgia in the present to figure out what we're missing, and then we can try to add those things back in.
Laurie Santos, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much.